you may have heard, but Feminist Frequency has a new initiative called the Games and Online Harassment Hotline. This week, the hotline teamed up with 3 other nonprofits who serve the gaming community. Take This, Global Game Jam, and the IGDA Foundation to launch the Stay in the Game Relief Fund. This campaign will help make sure that our organizations can stay in the game during the COVID-19 pandemic, because more people in this community need our help more than ever. You can give back by checking out the campaign at givebutter.com/stayinthegame. You can donate or even start your own fundraising page.
I think because I saw this movie for the first time when I was like 18 and I still had kind of an immature Play-Doh brain that was easily manipulated, I was like, oh, these are nice moments. And then I've just watched the movie consistently since then. So they work for me, okay? But like
every day. Cailtin watches this movie every day to go to sleep. Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by the long-lost 4th member of the Pussycats, Carolyn Pettit.
You can find out all about it in our Behind the Music episode.
Today, we're going to be traveling from the small town Riverdale to the top of the pop charts as we revisit the 2001 film Josie and the Pussycats. And joining us, which you can either blame for or celebrate the topic this week, is Cailtin Durante.
What do you mean? Why would anyone blame me for anything for encouraging everyone to watch this amazing, perfect movie?
I got so much blame that will come up in the next little bit of this. For those of you who don't remember, Cailtin is a writer and comedian who also co-hosts the Bechdel Cast. Previously, she joined us here on FFR back on episode 107 to talk about the movie Noelle, which was also quite the winner. We are 2 for 2, Cailtin.
It sounds to me like you are putting Noelle and Josie and the Pussycats in the same category. Which I don't understand. Josie, and I know it sounds like I'm joking, but I truly like Josie and the Pussycats is borderline flawless, and I love it so much. And Noelle was kind of a stinker, so I don't see the comparison at all.
Normally we would have some intro banter, but I feel like we just need to get like right into this because I feel like Caitlin's just rearing to go. So let me introduce the movie for those of you who aren't familiar or could use a refresher. It was first released in 2001. Josie and the Pussycats was a box office failure at the time, which, fun fact, I saw this in the theaters in 2001.
Oh, wow.
I did. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But it has since gained cult classic status, and it is actually easy to see why. Originally appearing in Archie comics and also starring in a cartoon series in the early 1970s, here Josie and the Pussycats takes on the out-of-control corporate commercialism of the early 2000s. Rachel Leigh Cook, Rosario Dawson, and Tara Reid star as the little trio, and they're supported by Parker Posey and Alan Cumming, who chew up the scenery with relish as record industry masterminds who have nefarious plans for the band and their music. Y'all, this movie is just they live with, like, chicks. Just saying, just in case anyone wants to fight me on that.
See, I would love to fight you on that. Where do I start? It's way more fun than they live. Also, okay, sometimes this is something that my co-host on the Bechdel Cast, Jamie, and I talk about, where there's a tendency to criticize female-driven movies and compare them to similar male-led movies as an excuse to not like them. Like, people did that with Now and Then, and they're like, oh, it's just Stand By Me for girls. People did that with Booksmart. They're like, oh, it's just super bad for girl. Like,
I think that's an important point. Like, I'll be honest, as I was watching this, there are aspects of this film that I really like and aspects of the film that I don't like so much. But there was also that question inside of me. Obviously, it's about pop musicians. And something that came up in my mind was the recent, or not recent at this point, a few years ago, but how, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before in other contexts, but how, Taylor Swift has her album 1989, I think it is. And then what's his name? Ryan, Ryan Adams did like a song for song cover album of 1989. And there was and it brought up all this stuff because there were critics and, people who were like, oh, he brings out like the sophistication in the songs and he makes it much more like, but it really, if you kind of look at it closely, it was really just the denigration of girly things for being girly and like viewing something that sounds, more masculine as more sophisticated as better art because it's more masculine. And, and I think that is something that can happen with our view, absolutely happen with our viewing of films as well, right? Our tendency to be like, well, the male version of this, the one that stars men going through basically the same plot or whatever is better because it doesn't have that like, because we as a society hate femininity and therefore that the version featuring girls or women gets denigrated just because it features girls or women.
I have two things to say.
Yes, please.
One is I don't think They Live was any good either. So
sure.
I feel just in my defense, as you're all calling me sexist, because that's exactly what just happened.
No, I'm
no, I'm kidding, Carolyn.
Yeah, I know.
I'm totally kidding.
Fair.
I am calling you sexist, Anita.
How dare you? But two, one, you're all absolutely right. And I think that we often forget, in addition to that point, that like people, like there's always a first. And so there's always a first like trope. There's always a first way of doing something in a film, in storytelling and whatever. And so like sometimes when you've seen it multiple times, you start getting tired of it. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or that it's not done in a particularly good or interesting way. It's just like, I think that, I don't know, it's so easy for us to forget that things like Cailtin and I were talking about this the other day, where you go back and you watch old films and you're like, oh man, I've seen that trope a million times. And you're like, but this was the first time ever. And so it's so hard to look at things in the past with sort of fresh eyes or a clear understanding of the context in which they came out.
For sure. But I think what is kind of tragic about that is that because media has been so heavily focused on men and made by men, men get all the first versions of everything. So things that have become tropes were like things that, were quote unquote invented by men, or not even necessarily that, but it's just that like, because it was so hard for stories to be made for and by and about women historically in cinema and other media, that people, you see these movies that are similar to the male versions of those stories, and we're like, oh, women are just copying men all the time. Oh, there's a female reboot, boo. But it's only because like we just haven't been given the opportunity to actually like do anything original because we just weren't allowed.
Yeah, totally. So I was in my late teens when this movie came out. I saw it because, context, little punk rock Anita was so not into this kind of movie or interested in this topic at all, or like this type of thing. My girlfriend at the time had a huge crush on Rachel Lee Cook, so we had to go see all the movies that she was in, which were plenty at this time. She was sort of like an it girl around these kinds of, lighthearted or rom-com type films. I suspect, though, that at like some point in watching this, I literally have no memory of it, but I probably was like, yeah, consumerism, fuck that, like, cool. I probably thought that this was really smart and like this deep commentary, where now I'm just like rolling my eyes at the fact that like so what came to mind as a adult watching this outside of this time period, because it is so much of its time period, is in the 90s and 2000s, there was a really big trend of ironic sexism. And what that is when media makers would just do sexism, but it wouldn't be considered sexist anymore because there's this idea that we're beyond that we're so like not unequal. There's no inequality anymore, that it's fine to like poke fun at sexism. But that's not what was happening. So like think of like the Man Show, for example, right? Like those sorts of things. There's all those the commercials, the like Carl's Jr. whatever commercials where like the women are like washing themselves on cars or whatever, or eating the like dripping burgers. Like all of that was so common back then and would be what I would call ironic sexism. This, to me, this movie feels like ironic capitalism.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know that every single one of those companies paid for that product placement. Like they're trying to make fun of it, but they're just doing it.
I might be wrong about this, but I thought that they didn't get any money from the corporate, like the product placement.
Then
but
how
I
could
might
they
be very
use all
wrong.
of it? Just under like fair use?
I guess.
Probably
don't quote me on
probably
this.
or a mutual agreement that, you know, they probably figured that just by having their imagery in the film, like it would be beneficial to both the film and to the brands, right? There could have been that kind of arrangement.
So there regardless of money though, like, and I don't know, I didn't look this up, but like capitalism supported this.
Right. It definitely made me ask the question, you know, of, you know, because sometimes, you know, when I used to ask questions like, is it possible to make an action film that is at its core anti-violent? And I really don't believe that it is. But, you know, so this film made me ask, like, okay, so is it possible to make a film that is so filled with corporate logos and brands and so on as this one that is legitimately like anti-corporate capitalism? And I mean, and, you know, I don't think that this film, I think it's fun the way this film, you know, fronts or offers up the, you know, think for yourself message in the end and all of that. Like, and certainly for like a teen or youth oriented movie, I kind of think it's fine. But I also think like I found this film almost a little exhausting to watch in the sense that it felt like there are corporate logos in almost literally every frame
Basically
of the movie
every frame.
Yeah. And after a while, my eyes were just like, oh my God, I can't handle any more like branding being, you know, shoved into my eyeballs. And I get that was kind of like the joke, or the, you know, the movie was doing that on purpose, you know, commenting on that as it was doing it. But still, like, just the way that brand familiarity and, you know, logos and iconography and all that stuff works, like, it still is promotional, even if the film thinks that it's critiquing that aspect of our culture.
I mean, did I want to buy some jerkin tree torns and eat a Big Mac after watching this movie? Yes.
Okay. Here's another issue. You ready?
Go for it, Anita.
They are literally no different from the like cool, trendy kids. Like, okay. So okay, here's
what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Because okay,
okay.
Yeah.
I think that aesthetically, they're all fucking gorgeous, beautiful, mainstream looking women.
Yes.
They are somehow immune to the effects of all of the subliminal messaging that everyone else is a part of in the beginning of the movie.
They don't listen to du jour. They're right. They're probably too cool to listen to that kind of mainstream.
There's a scene where the cool chicks at school like start being like, oh, you're banned, huh? No one likes you. And I was like, you all look exactly the same. I'm sorry. Like you're not like the weirdo outcast that they're trying to make you, which is just such a thing of the time that does this. And then when they go through their whole transformation, like after they have that long scene with the hairdressers and poor Rosario Dawson and all of those white hairdressers, they look exactly the same.
It's true.
I mean, like minorly different. Like they're just. What?
Yeah.
So see your point.
They didn't even take glasses off, y'all. They didn't even like put glasses on and make them like less nerdy or whatever.
Well, it is interesting because there are two characters in the film who are legitimate outcast losers, and they are the Alan Cumming character and the Parker Posey character, at least as we discover at the end their true identities. So I found those two characters fascinating. And certainly Alan, like their performances were the most enjoyable aspect of the film for me. But so you have this scene. One of the most interesting scenes in the film to me is where Parker Posey, in her like cool, like supremely cool alter ego that she's created for herself of Fiona, has the Pussycats come and hang out with her, right? And she asks Josie, how much do you weigh? And Josie's like 118, and Fiona's like, I weigh 115. And it's like that the competitive, like the ways in which women are internalized by sort of internalized patriarchy to compete with each other and to see each other as people to be competed against, rather than joining up in like solidarity. Like everything that Parker Posey was kind of saying in that scene to me was exactly came from that kind of place. But then we learn that well she's actually like in high school and whatever, she was this complete and total loser. And I don't know, I wonder, because I think you're right, Anita, like the Pussycats are very conventionally attractive and everything. Like, so what is it then saying about these outcasts that they become, that like the true outcasts, like, like the way that their path is to by what they do with the kind of resentment and alienation that they felt is to go to the opposite extreme and become as sort of successful and as conventional almost along mainstream terms as they can possibly become. I don't know. It's just a fascinating aspect of the film to me.
Which is, so that all transpires where they reveal their true selves. They take off the wigs and bust the gut out of the pants and stuff like that. And then the band manager is something like, "Oh, the lesson to be learned here today." I love when a movie just like tells you what the themes are. The dialogue. But like, he's like, "It's just to be, happy with who you are and think for yourself," which is like, I mean, how successful the movie actually is at getting that message across is up for debate. But like, it is to have the Pussycats be extremely like conventionally attractive by Western beauty standards and just very mainstream looking and just mainstream in all the things that they do. It is sort of contradictory to what the movie is saying, perhaps. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that ending I found extremely offensive. It reminded me of, and this is not a unique thing, but I don't know. For some reason, Ace Ventura popped into my mind, where at the end, the reveal was this deeply gross transphobic joke that like reframes the whole movie. And in this way, it was ableist and like fat phobic and like it was just, it's real like that just, love Alan Cumming and Parker Posey. And I do think that they were enjoyable in this film, but that ending was just so troubling that like even though they were trying to be like, it's okay to be this way, it was like really intentionally making them look like horrifying so that you have this very physical reaction to like, oh yeah, no wonder you're losers, right? Like,
that is one of the major failings of the movie. That ending could have easily, or like that part of the ending could have easily been written out or rewritten or done something completely different. I don't like, because up to that point for me, I was like, yeah, the anti-consumerist message that the movie is putting forth, again, how effective is it? Perhaps not the most, which by the way, so not to brag or anything here, but I'm on a Wikipedia because I am scholarly. And it says that none of the advertising was paid promotion by the represented brands. It was all inserted voluntary by the filmmakers. So they did not receive any money for showing these various brands on screen. Anyway, so yeah, the end, that ending is just it really undoes a lot of potentially good stuff the movie was doing and trying to say, and I really hate that is part of how the movie concludes. I do agree that is wildly offensive and should not have been in the movie.
Yeah. Another part of the sort of structure of this film that I had a hard time with was there are these moments that I think are supposed to be sincere in this otherwise like super kind of campy, silly, over the top, like breaking the fourth wall film. And so, for example, when they're on the plane and they're like, we're going to be friends forever. And then there's another moment at the aquarium where what's her fuck, Josie is like, I don't know if I can be a rock star. And they're like, yes, you can. Blah, blah, blah. And these feel like they're supposed to be these deeply sentimental moments that are supposed to be sincere, but I could, correct me if I'm wrong, like they just didn't play for, like, I was like, wait, is this a joke too? I don't understand what's happening here.
I guess for me, I thought that they could have worked, or that I think the cast did a fine job with what they were given. I think, Rachel Lee Cook is very likable and very kind of sweet, in this role. I guess like I just felt like what happened there was that, because of the plot, the mind control, subliminal message plot, like requiring so much time to be set up and developed and everything, that the relationships, the friendship aspect got like short shrift. And so it just like, I felt like, oh, if only the film had spent a little more time like developing them as characters and like their friendship, then all of that stuff like might have worked better. But I just felt like the balance was to, it was... that aspect just was kind of underdeveloped because the film was emphasizing, it's the plot, the mind control plot, which, I mean,
the mind control plot, eh?
Well, that's sort of what it is. I mean, that is what totally it is, right? Yeah.
There is a lot of sort of brainwashing, product placement, all kinds of that stuff, perhaps too much of that stuff at the expense of character development. That is definitely a thing. So for me, I mean, those moments that are intended to be more sincere, I think because I saw this movie for the first time when I was like 18 and I still had kind of an immature Play-Doh brain that was easily manipulated. I was like, oh, these are nice moments. And then I've just watched the movie consistently since then. So they work for me, okay? But like
every day. Cailtin watches this movie every day to go to sleep.
Yes. In fact, my room is decorated exactly like every scene of this movie. It's just, I've got Target emblems everywhere. I've got, Bounce. I've got Motorola phones attached to my wall. It's incredible. It's beautiful.
So, I will say, so the film starts out with this boy band called Du Jour, right? And Alan Cumming is their manager. So actually, okay. Oh, that's like the funny thing. All right. I was actually going to say like that for me, those first like 8 minutes or so that we spend with Du Jour, especially on the plane, like were so obnoxious, and I hated those characters so much that after that ended, and like it was such a relief that I was like, oh thank God, that the writing and the rest of this film isn't like that. Like oh okay, those characters were, I get that they were supposed to be a band in which the egos were like fraying the alliance of the band and everything. But God, I just hated spending time with them so much that I was like so relieved when that part was over. And then so it almost made me enjoy the rest of the movie more.
Because it wasn't that.
That I hated the first 8 minutes or so much, right?
Oh my gosh. But what about when Seth Green is like, it's my face, it's my face.
I mean, I will never forget that. I mean, so I will give it points for being very memorable in that regard. Like, I cannot forget Seth Green talking about, oh, this is my face, and he does the gesture and makes the face. I will say,
the one funny thing in that scene that I found amusing was whoever kept being like, du jour is friendship, du jour means brotherhood, du jour means whatever,
means
or like
du jour means safety positions, crash positions.
When they died and Josie and Valerie were, or you know what I mean.
Spoilers, they don't die.
Oh no. They're all watching the news about the plane crash, and it's so they have all these MTV, like old MTV shows on it, which I thought was also kind of amusing. But anyways, there's a news report that says that the record company hasn't released a statement about the plane crash yet, but has released a box set that will be available for purchase tomorrow, which I was like, oh, that feels really real. That
is beautiful commentary.
It was very good. Yeah.
Oh, just real quick, I thought it was interesting, a few weeks ago or a few months ago on this podcast, in my Freak Out, I mentioned an episode of the Reply All podcast, which is all about, like, really, in a way, it's all about how the commercial, like how the record industry just exploded in the early 2000s with signing bands and artists at this, like, rate far beyond what it had ever kind of done before. And it was really, like, unsustainable. And so I thought that was interesting, the timing, like, that this film came out in 2001, kind of when the music industry was, maybe that period was still going, or maybe it had sort of started waning. But because this, the plot of this film involves Josie and the Pussycats getting this, like, huge record deal based on basically nothing, like, I wonder if, it seemed like, obviously this film is exaggerated and overblown, and it's and everything, but it almost seems like maybe there was that element of timely truth to it about how the record industry was functioning at that point with regard to, like, to just swallowing up but then spitting out, like, all these acts real quick,
Yeah. There was one line that I literally yelled, "How dare they?" at the TV. Would you like to know what that one line was?
Yes, please.
It was when they were talking to, what's his name? Alan M.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was like, what's with the initial, this is weird, it didn't work for Sheila E. And I was like, how dare you? It absolutely does work for Sheila E. How dare you say anything blaspheme about Sheila E.
Right. But didn't it, because you're kind of supposed to hate Alan Cumming's character, right? So it kind of works, right?
No.
He's just wrong.
That logic.
He's wrong about so many things. I mean, he's wrong about when he says that, bands that with "and" in the name sell more, as Rosario Dawson's character immediately points out, like, well, what about the Beatles? What about this group? What about that group?
Right.
He's like, yeah. Okay, if you want to split hairs, fine. So, I think we can write Wyatt off as just, like, wrong about almost everything.
Well, he was definitely wrong about that shit.
Yes,
I'm just saying.
I agree.
I'm personally offended by that one. So Cailin,
yes,
tell us, like, what it is that keeps bringing you back to this movie.
And I do understand and acknowledge its shortcomings, or its shortcoming, Alan Cumming. That wasn't worth the trip to get to the bad joke. Anyway, I part of it is nostalgia, because I saw it. I didn't see it right when it came out for the first time, but I saw it in 2004 and just, like, fell in love with it and have been in love with it ever since. I don't know. I think it's really funny. I do love Alan Cumming's character. I love Parker Posey's character. Those performances are so over the top and wild and hilarious to me. I do like its attempt at commentary of anti-capitalism, anti-consumerism. Again, it sends mixed messages when literally every frame has a Target logo or a Tide logo, or they even wedged Tidy Cats in there. And so, but it at least for 2001, attempting an anti-consumerist message, I have to admire that. Other filmmakers and other films since then have done a better job at it. I mean, in these movies are geared more toward like class disparity and things like that. But, Bong Joon-ho has made a career of being like, rich people suck and capitalism is not good. So, maybe later movies have been more effective at these sort of anti-capitalist themes. But I don't know. I just love, it's a fun romp. I love a female-driven narrative that's about women they keep calling themselves like a rock group, but I'm pretty sure it's pop music. So, but even so, like female musicians, there aren't that many stories about them. I love I was going to say I love the characters, but I also find Tara Reid's character to be insufferable.
That's so hard. So hard.
Yeah. And sure, it is very kind of the time, a very like 2001 approach to, commentary and anti-consumerism and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think that and, we covered the movie on the Bechdel Cast, and we, had some things to say about it just in terms of it being a movie about female friendship, another category that's tends to be underrepresented. A movie, I like the love story is sort of wedged in, but I'm also like, well, it's also about like this ordinary dude who is not threatened by Josie's success, and he's like, I feel like a lot of men would be like, oh no, she's more successful than I am. I have to treat her horribly, or something like that. I don't know. There's just like little things like that. Not to
undermine that point, because you're right. But there is that really weird scene at the beginning where it's like the cool hot chick can fix cars, like the cool hot chick knows dude stuff that like feels out of nowhere. Like it had no context. It was like there was no character development. It was totally like the not Terminator, the Transformers, like the scene that I used to use a lot in my teachings, where it's just like, cool, like the sexy chick knows how to like fix a car, so that's really hot, isn't it? Super hot.
She's one of the guys. She's a Guy Scout. Yeah, we had this basically exact same conversation on this episode of the Bechdel Cast, where that is a trope that drives me bonkers, where it's like the shorthand for showing that this hot girl is actually like kind of one of the guys is that she's really good at fixing cars, because a lot of movies employ this trope and it does drive me bananas.
It's exhausting. There is a line I would like to point out. There is a like an educational video commentary, and Eugene Levy is the host of it. And in it, he says, what's good for the economy is good for the country. And I just like, I cringe so hard because it's too real. Like right now, it in feels this moment in time,
I thought the exact
like, that's basically what like these governors and like government officials are saying about reopening states right now, or reopening like business as usual, just because all they care about is the economy. And that's kind of the like the campy, and not campy, that's not the word I want to say. The what's the word I'm looking for? The not propaganda line, but the spin, like it's not, we're okay with people dying. But the economy is good for the country, like. So
and what's that good felt for the country is good for America. The most ass kicking, or I forget what it is exactly.
No humans in the economy, then, still that's all that matters, right? Oh boy.
Yes.
All right. Well, I have one more note that I feel like I should share.
Please.
Rachel Lee Cook didn't even pretend to learn how to play guitar, because that ending scene, if you look at her hands, she just like has one chord that she moves like every 5 minutes. And I just want to point that out, which is totally fine and not a problem, but also funny.
Yeah.
It's the things I look for the believability of a role, Like, she should have worked harder at this role.
I mean,
I don't mean any of this. Is she still acting?
I don't know.
Not so much, but I like she. Yeah, I looked her up on Wikipedia after I watched this, and I mean, like a little bit here and there, but she. I think it's like, and I don't know this for sure, but I suspect it's not that she didn't want to, but that like her moment as an it girl star kind of passed, and that she just couldn't get great roles anymore, which would be unfortunate because I think she's very, I think, again, as I said,
she
I think
got
she's
super typecast.
Yeah, but I think she's super likable and a great screen presence, and I would have loved to have, seen her star in more films. Would have been all right with me.
I texted my ex being like, "You'll never guess what I'm watching," and reminded her that she was obsessed with Rachel Lee Cook when we were dating back when we were teenagers. And she was like, "Oh my God, I completely forgot about that and don't even know who that is." And like looked her up and was like, "She's still hot." And I was like, "Okay, cool, great. This is delightful. Let's, whatever."
The two movies that I know her best from are this one and She's All That. And I feel like both of them have these extended makeover scenes, which, I mean, is unfortunately yet another trope of a lot of female-driven movies. And I also found it interesting that, like, I was thinking about how a lot of like female-driven stories, especially ones that are kind of in, more in the rom-com genre or just sort of the lighter fare, tonally lighter movies, will have a shopping montage or a dress trying on montage or a makeover montage, and which tend to be like pretty pro-consumer, just like the idea of like, let's go shopping and buy a bunch of makeup and dresses and stuff. And for a makeover montage to happen in a movie that is trying to give an anti-consumer message, I also thought was not the best choice.
Yeah.
Well, I always thought that she was the woman in that movie that was about the guy who couldn't have sex for 30 days or whatever that came out.
40 days and 40 nights. No, that's not her. Is it?
Oh.
Or is it?
No, I don't think so.
That movie is such a piece of trash.
It is
like
weirdly, I never saw that one.
I know I saw it. I guess Shannon Sossamon. That's who it was that was in that one. So like, I don't remember the movie, but the concept of the fact that like he was literally couldn't take not having sex for 40 days and that like his dick was going to explode everywhere if he didn't have sex. Like the whole principle of that movie is so deeply fucked up. And I'm sad that I remember it. I'm sad I remember that it exists in the world, and I just referenced it here on Feminist Frequency Radio. I'm sorry to everyone. I should just quit forever.
Yeah, you're canceled. I'm canceling you.
But you're the one that remembered the name of it, so
we covered it. We covered it last spring for Easter because it's like a Lent movie, so we covered it around Easter time on the Bechdel Cast. So that's why I have any sort of recollection of it.
That makes sense.
In my defense.
That makes sense. Well, great. Apparently, Shannon Sossamon named one of her children Audio.
It's true.
Audio Science Cailtin, which, all right, I think we need to just move on from this segment before I look up anything else on the internet. All right, y'all, we will be right back with our freakouts. The COVID-19 pandemic has the gaming industry and community playing the world on challenge mode right now. So many gamers, developers, and studios are affected. At the same time, people are turning to games as a source of relief, escape, and connection. Every day is a reminder that the people who make and play games matter. Nonprofits that make this industry the best it can be too are being hit hard by the pandemic as well. This is why our Games and Online Harassment Hotline has partnered with Take This, Global Game Jam, and the IGDA Foundation, 3 other nonprofits, and we've started the Stay in the Relief Game Fund. Collectively, our organizations decrease stigma and support the mental health of game lovers and creators. We work to create supportive environments for an entry into this creative industry and pave the way for a gaming industry and community that is as safe and inclusive as it is innovative. We need your help right now because more people in gaming need our help now more than ever. You can make a difference for those in your community who have been deeply affected by the pandemic by going to givebutter.com/stayinthegame and making a donation and sharing it with your friends. What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carolyn, why don't you get us started?
Okay, so I don't have anything that's really been thrilling me or anything because I consumed basically one media thing this past week, right? That's what we call the media things. And my feelings about it are mixed, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway. So on Amazon, there's a new series called Tales from the Loop. And this is inspired by the artwork of a Swedish painter named Simon Stålenhag. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. And his artwork is really quite fascinating. It's they're paintings that are set in a kind of alternate universe, in early 1980s period, Swedish, small town, countryside sort of surroundings. But they have like machinery, they have like robots or structures or things in them that just like didn't exist in reality. And so the paintings kind of evoke this nostalgia for a world that never was, but that feels, when you're looking at the paintings, very convincing. They're very detailed and they just feel like you could extrapolate from them a whole fiction in which that would actually be real. So the Amazon series, it's an 8-episode series. It's kind of an anthology series. Like each episode sort of stands alone and has a kind of, it's been compared to the Twilight Zone because there's usually some sort of, twist or something that happens. But there's also this interlocking structure at play, and it's really, it's very watchable. Like it's really, it's got a very, it's very nice to look at. It has a kind of poignant, melancholy tone to the whole thing that I found effective.
I heard that the writing is a little weak though, even though it's an interesting concept.
Well, my issue with it, is like, I think that I don't think the writing is like, I think the writing, basically here. Okay, here's where I think the show fails for me personally as a viewer is that I feel that it prioritizes its plots and its kind of gimmicks, its interest in the kind of magical technology that each episode focuses on over the characters and their emotions and their the psychological and emotional lives of the people that are caught up in it. So, it definitely does some interesting things narratively. For instance, there's a character who does something that's pretty horrible. And you might expect him to get this kind of a traditional kind of comeuppance, right? A kind of like that, that the plot is going to like deliver to him at some point, some kind of retribution for what he's done. But it doesn't. Life just kind of goes on. And I sort of appreciated that the show isn't interested in like retribution and giving us the satisfaction of like, yeah, you got yours, but at the same time, I feel like it glosses over things. I feel like there are, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but there are things that happen in the relationships of the characters where there are just these leaps, like, these characters have arrived at some kind of understanding with each other. But how did they get there without working, or we didn't see them work through what must have been a tremendous amount of grief and anger and things that would have been in a situation like that. And so I think that the show is so committed to its tone that it keeps the characters and their lives at arm's length. So I think it's a very interesting series and visually, again, quite captivating. But for me as a viewer, it ultimately, it's missing something crucial at its core. However, if there were to be a second season, I would still come back to it with the hopes that maybe it finds a way to be more human while continuing to tell the kinds of stories that it's telling. Because I love the time period. I love the technology in it. I just think that it doesn't follow through on using that technology to tell human stories in the way that it should.
All right. Cailtin, what are you freaking out about?
Well, admittedly, I'm never up to date on like the newest TV, at least, and I feel like we're in a quarantine, for crying out loud. There's no movies coming out. So I am not watching anything new, but I am every day, in addition to watching Josie and the Pussycats and decorating my room exactly like the mise en scène of the film, I freak out about Paddington and Paddington 2. They are the best movies.
Wait, there's two of them?
Yes.
Oh my God, Anita.
Did they both come out in theaters?
Yes.
Wow. All right. I don't know. Just check. I'm asking
Paddington
with
2,
no judgment.
People love Paddington 2. I just can't believe you haven't.
I know Cailtin does.
No, but okay. Yeah. Lots of people love Paddington 2. So anyway,
great.
Yes.
I no judgment.
Sure.
I was just clarifying facts.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Real
I'm happy.
world facts.
Well, I often think to myself, what would Paddington do? What would Paddington do? Paddington, if you didn't know about his films, he would understand, because he'd be like, "Oh, I'm just a little bear. I don't like." He's just so sweet and kind, and he wouldn't even think he's important enough to have movies made about him. But anyway, the first one came out in 2014. Second one came out in, I think, 2017. But time is something that my understanding of time doesn't work anymore. But they're great films. They're very endearing. They are for all ages. Adults can enjoy them as well. And they're so sweet. And I love a movie that is that features a male bear. A man, but a bear, that is devoid of toxic masculinity. And Paddington, he doesn't even know what that is, let alone displaying any.
He's never even heard of it.
He's never even heard of it. And if he did hear about it, he would think it was horrible. So it's just these stories about this sweet little bear and the hijinks that he gets into. And I love them so much. And they're really great movies to watch if you're just looking for a very heartwarming and endearing story during these difficult times. Can't recommend Paddington and Paddington 2 enough.
You heard it here, folks. Paddington and Paddington 2 will get you through the quarantines.
It's true.
All right. I have a list of stacking freakouts, and every time we get to this point now, I don't know which one to share, because, like, you know how you all know we either have too many or we have none, and that's just how the freakouts times goes. Carolyn knows what I'm talking about.
I do, yes.
So I am going to freak out about a podcast episode of Still Processing. So I'm not a big podcast person. Like, I'm not against them, obviously. I just don't find
anti-podcast crusader Anita Sarkeesian.
I don't find a lot of time in my day to listen to podcasts because I don't have commutes even in non-quarantine times. But there are some that I really like. And so a friend of mine was like, hey, I think you might be into this. I listened to it while I was scrubbing my oven, which was fucking disgusting and horrifying. And it was a disaster. But because I did it and I cleaned 10% of it, every time I turn my oven on now, the smoke alarm doesn't go off every time I turn it on. Every time. Every motherfucking goddamn time. Doesn't do that anymore. Anyways, clean your ovens. That said, that was when I found time to listen to this. Still Processing is a podcast by, who is it by? It's, I think, Wesley Morris and Jenna Wortham. It's a New York Times podcast. They are critics. Anyways, whatever. I don't know that much about them. I don't know why I'm pretending that I do. This episode is called Wake. It's from last year. It's so good, though. I really love the way that these two talk about media and analyze media, and I'm looking forward to listening to more episodes of it. So Wake is talking about Watchmen and Parasite in terms of histories and race and how it shapes our modern lives and what that all looks like. And the episode actually starts with Jenna talking about visiting plantations and like the history of slavery and how we talk about it, what we hide, what we don't hide in the curation of these spaces. And so like it was just really smart how like, you know, her perspective on all of it and framing this whole conversation within what are our histories, how do we talk about them, how do we show them. So yeah, I found that episode to be really good, and I highly recommend it to all of our listeners, but nobody else. All right. This week we have a guest freak out from Daniel from Germany. Take it away.
Hi, this is Daniel from Germany. I'm a longtime listener and a big fan of all your work since the Tropes vs. Women video series. What the three of you are doing is incredibly important, and you'll manage to be entertaining as well as insightful. Your podcast is a highlight of my week and always over way too soon. Today, I would like to freak out about Remedy Entertainment's latest game, Control. Some spoilers ahead. It was released in August 2019 for PlayStation, Xbox, and the Epic Game Store, and features Josie Faden, a woman with a knack for the supernatural, who stumbles into the Federal Bureau of Control. There, an alien species called the Hiss has taken over, and the whole building is on lockdown while the Bureau agents are trying to fight the otherworldly threat. At first glance, Control's female protagonist might seem like a simple swap out for a male protagonist, but after finishing the game, including its first DLC, The Foundation, I came to a somewhat different conclusion. In the course of the story, Josie becomes the new director of the Bureau and manages to solve most of the problems left behind by her male predecessors. She does so by following her own instincts and making her own decisions, rather than following the protocol established by men. At her side is Emily Pope, a brilliant scientist who was stuck in second chair since her superior and former head of research, Dr. Darling, another man in power, wouldn't share crucial details with her. Under Jessie's lead, she becomes a new head of research and helps her to clean up the mess left by her former boss, who facilitated the Hiss invasion in the first place. Neither Emily nor Josie are portrayed in a hypersexual way, but are fleshed out people, and the over-the-shoulder camera behind Josie is not ogling her butt, as was the case in some Tomb Raider games. In the last cutscene after finishing the DLC, there's also some interesting symbolism at work. The Bureau's directors report to an otherworldly entity called a board, which is represented by an inverted black pyramid. It's not clear throughout the game what its real intentions are, but Josie ends up getting suspicious of the board and decides to not just blindly follow its orders anymore. In the aforementioned cutscene, we see the inverted pyramid of the board being turned on its head so that it now rests on its base. This is interesting insofar as the inverted pyramid symbolizes the masculine and the regular pyramid the feminine. And one could interpret this as the definite change from a patriarchal hierarchy to a new matriarchal system. I don't think this is a coincidence either, since the symbolism is explained earlier in a collectible document that Josie can find. Apart from having these positive feminist elements, Control is a creative third-person shooter with lots of unexpected moments and breathtaking art direction. I can warmly recommend it to fans of the genre. Thank you for listening to me ramble, and I'm looking forward to all the feminist greatness that you still have in store for us.
Thank you so much for submitting that freakout, Daniel. I actually haven't had a chance to play Control yet, but I was on a live stream with someone who was playing it, so I've seen some of it. But Carol, have you played it?
Yeah. I thought Daniel's analysis in his Freq Out was actually really interesting because I've only played the core game. I haven't played the DLC that Daniel was talking about. Certainly, it's a visually like extremely striking game. It's very unusual and interesting for a kind of AAA action game, just visually. So it's cool to hear that maybe that the DLC goes to some interesting places narratively and thematically as well.
Awesome. Well, hey, we always like hearing what you're freaking out about, so you can submit your own at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the Freakin' After Party, which is only available to backers of this podcast, and you can become one if you head over to patreon.com/FemFreak. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found, and if you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us. And also, why don't you follow us on all of the things? You know the things, like, Twitter's a thing, and Instagram's a thing, and YouTube's a thing. We're FemFreak on all of those, except not on YouTube. We are Feminist Frequency on YouTube, which is confusing because I'm confusing everybody. But whatever. If you're here, you know where to find us. Our show is engineered by Rob Para. Carrie Stimson provides technical support. Artwork by Jamie Varon. Intro music by Phil Circus. Hey, Cailtin, if folks want to find out more about you, where might they do that?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Cailtin Durante. You can check out my website, CaitlinDurante.com. That's where I post my show dates for when I do stand-up sometimes, when it's not the quarantines. I also teach online screenwriting classes. If anyone's interested in learning screenwriting from me, I do have a master's degree in screenwriting, which I would never I hate to mention it, but there it is. So I teach online screenwriting classes. Some more information about that is on my website as well. And check out the Bechdel Cast. It's Jamie Loftus's and my weekly podcast where we analyze a different movie every week through the lens of intersectional feminism. And we determine that most movies don't treat women that well. We did an episode on Josie and the Pussycats a while back. It was kind of one of our earlier episodes, so I think we would have a slightly different, more mature conversation about it today. But give that a listen if you're interested. And I think that'll do it.
Join us next week for another feminist dive into popular culture. Thanks for listening.